Hello everyone, my name is Aimee Ongeso and I work for the Legal Empowerment Network that is convened by Namati. Well, I will share shortly about the work we do, but I would like to thank Leonida and Hakinawiri for giving me the opportunity to present about our work and to you for being a wonderful audience. I think that this is a wonderful topic, looking at the shrinking civic space from a higher institution perspective. Not too long ago, I was in campus as well at the University of Nairobi. I understand too well the fear of speaking up for fear of repercussions, even if you know that what you're standing for is right. The fear of being targeted by the school administration, or simply, at least in my case, the fear of being tear gassed. As a result, sometimes I would witness some things that I knew were wrong, just from a moral standpoint. I had not interacted with the term human rights violation at the time, but I just did not do anything about it or even try and do something about it. This could be because I was seriously disempowered and disconnected. And we also have a normalized culture, normalized sexual exploitation, normalized bullying from the administration, just normalizing things that should be condemned. And even if you do want to speak up, there is the fear of being branded, kimbelembele, snitch, you know the terminologies. And this is just because you want to stand up for what is right. That being said, I would like to acknowledge that my presentation will be general and it will be up to you to contextualize this information and adapt it to your context, given your realities. Now to my work. The Legal Empowerment Network is the largest community of grassroots justice defenders in the world. The network brings together over 2,300 civil society organizations and 9,000 individuals from 170 countries. I am hoping after this presentation that you will sign up and be members. Leonida can show you how to do so. So Namati serves as the convener of this network. Our goal through the network is to cultivate a global movement of people. Our goal through the network is to cultivate a global movement capable of collectively tackling the greatest justice challenges of our time. I am based in Nairobi and I lead regional work in East and West Africa. So how does the Legal Empowerment Network work? First, we work to build a strong community of practice. This means we cultivate effective, committed leaders as well as a deeply engaged membership to the network. Secondly, a movement needs knowledge and resources, and its members need the capacity to use them effectively. We invest in the infrastructure and learning opportunities required to develop our members' ability to advance justice. Some of our key offerings include our leadership course, learning exchanges, educational webinars, facilitation such as this, and other opportunities. Third, every movement has a call to action, clear targets around which members can orient their energies. We mobilize our members around issues that are meaningful to them. So what is legal empowerment? I have a few questions for you. So we look at the term legal empowerment. What is the main word? Legal or empowerment? Which is emphasized? The use of law or the ability to use law? Is legal empowerment a process or a goal? Please mark your responses and we will come back to them later at the end of this presentation. So why do we even focus on legal empowerment? Why do we have discussions about legal empowerment? The ideal situation is that injustices are supposed to be addressed by an effective legal system. Even within your case, in campus, the ideal situation is that any grievance you have should have an effective policy or legal system to address that violation or that grievance. The law is supposed to be just, fair, and responsive to the needs of individuals, groups, the student communities, and the wider community. This is the ideal situation. However, the reality is that the law is not always just. Implementation of the law is not always fair. In many cases, laws and legal processes can cause further injustices, and the system works against disadvantaged individuals and communities. So let us have an in-depth discussion on what legal empowerment is. So there are many definitions of legal empowerment. However, for our discussion today, we look at legal empowerment as a process or a cycle informed by these three components: know law, use law, shape law. Again, legal empowerment is a cycle or a process defined by these three components: know the law, use the law, and shape the law. So for example, when I say shape the law, I mean making changes or developing new law. So for example, sometimes there's a violation that takes place and there happens to be a law that addresses this violation. So you begin by knowing this law and then using it to claim your rights or address that violation. Or sometimes you realize that there are certain violations taking place, or that you would like to claim certain rights, but there is no law to address the violation or help you claim the right. So you advocate for the development of these laws, so you're shaping the law. Then the laws are developed and then they are implemented. Then you proceed to know this new law and use this new law. Or you find that there's a certain law in place, but it is discriminatory, or it is just a bad law. So in this case, you know this law, this bad law, then you advocate for it to be changed, so you're shaping it, then you use it once it has been changed. So you can see in certain cases, you know the law, shape the law, then know the law and use the law again. In certain cases, you can use the law, know the law, then shape it, or you can shape, use, know. It's a cycle. So it's not a linear, it doesn't move in a linear direction. So the goal of legal empowerment is that marginalized groups or victims of injustices must have the opportunity and the ability to take action and effectively address their justice issues. The direct participation of these groups and communities in asserting their rights is essential. So what does legal empowerment look like? I will share how it looks like programmatically for Namati. So we have paralegals that are trained in basic law and in skills like mediation, organizing, education, and advocacy. So rather than focusing on, I will solve this problem for you, community paralegals focus on legal empowerment, which is, we will solve this problem together. And when we are done, you will be in a stronger position to tackle problems like this in the future. So the individuals who work closely with these paralegals learn about their rights and how to realize them using the law. They in turn support their communities, creating ripples of empowerment. Experiences from the grassroots then go on to inform policy change. Paralegals collect data rigorously, assess the collected information, identify where systems are failing and how they can improve. And then the cycle continues. Once reforms are adopted, policies put in place, there's awareness raising, you put the changes to practice, and like this you advance justice and you democratize the law. In summary, people claim rights, people have the ability to use the law, and people use the law to advance their rights and interests. There are some other examples of legal empowerment that I would like to share with you. For example, a farmers association helps its members to gain greater control of their land, thereby increasing their incomes. Parents learn how to register the births of their children, ensuring their access to education later in life. Another example is a government public health program enables impoverished beneficiaries to understand and act on their rights to basic medical services, thus reducing infant mortality. A non-governmental organization works with grassroots groups to gradually make traditional justice systems less gender biased. So this makes it more accessible to the communities in that area who will then use these traditional justice systems. Another example is that market vendors negotiate the right to operate legally and free of harassment, protecting their livelihoods. And in your case, a good example of legal empowerment could be that you, as a student trained in legal empowerment work, you work with the broader student community so that they can understand and act on their rights, thus creating safe spaces for open, free dialogue with the administration. So that could be how legal empowerment looks like for you in your situation. So there are certain changes to notice in a legal empowerment process or cycle. You notice that people move from a lack of knowledge or inaccessibility of information to knowledge and critical understanding. So when you're sensitizing people, you just don't say, this is the law A, B, C, D, this is what is supposed to happen, 1, 2, 3. Yes, you create that awareness, but you have to engage the people you're targeting such that there's a critical understanding. And critical understanding is a process and it takes time. And the way you know that people have critically understood something is by the questions they ask and by the actions they are taking. Another change to notice is from helplessness and inaction to action. People assert their rights and they resist violations. Another change is that there's an absence of responsive policies, there's the presence of unjust policies to responsive policies and more participatory policy making. So this means, for example, in a certain institution, there was an oppressive policy or a lack of policy, then there was awareness creation and students went and told the institution, let us have this policy in place. And the institution responds by saying, okay, we can make this policy together. That's a beautiful legal empowerment example. And then there are also strategic shifts to notice in legal empowerment. From legal aid or legal services to legal empowerment. You see, with legal aid, what happens for those who might be law students here is that you sit at a table and those people who come to you with your problem, you administer, you administer to them and you try and help them solve their problems. So it's just one-on-one. So the people just know how to come to you. But in legal empowerment, you'll find that before a client comes to you as the advocate or as the lawyer, they have tried and exhausted other means. They have gone to maybe the chief, they have maybe gone to the local government authority there, maybe they've written it, they've tried to take some actions by themselves. They may succeed, so eventually they don't come up to you, but where they reach a difficult place is then now they come to you. Now that is legal empowerment. There's also a strategic shift from people as beneficiaries or recipients of services to people as active seekers of justice and claimants of rights, the aspect of agency. And then there's a strategic shift from an unresponsive government or an unresponsive regime to a more accountable government. Although this last one is, it's pretty ideal and it's pretty long term. So the focus of legal empowerment is not to provide services, not at all, but to strengthen the capacity of people to act, to strengthen the capacity of students to act. People realize their own agency. And you go beyond institutional support, but you prioritize support to grassroots communities, support to the students. Perspective of legal empowerment is not to accept the law as it is, but you work towards institutional changes in policy and practice. In legal empowerment, you do not address individual cases, but you focus primarily on systemic injustices. So I'll give you an example. I used to work for a legal aid institution called Kituo cha Sheria. So Kituo cha Sheria focuses on providing legal aid to persons who cannot afford it. we used to have a prisons project. Now, in this prisons project, we realized that many people are incarcerated because one, they do not know the law. There's a general ignorance of the law. And second of all, at the time, people could not, at that time, people were unable to access lawyers because there was no legal aid law in place. The only people who benefited from legal aid were the people on capital offense, charged for murder. Those are the only people under the law at the time who were able to access legal aid. So you can imagine you've been arrested for a petty offense, or let's say even an offense like robbery, or you've stolen somebody's sheep, whatever offense it is. You're brought before the court. You cannot afford a lawyer. You do not know your rights. You find some pedestrian issuing advice. They tell you just plead guilty, then you'll get less time. You plead guilty, oh my God, it's 30 years, it's 50 years, something like that. These were the cases we found when we were in prison. So we realized that there was a gap there, and we started, of course, advocating for a legal aid law and really pushing the government to develop and implement a legal aid law. So now we have in place a legal aid law, and people who meet certain criteria are entitled to legal aid services. So in that case, we dealt with a systemic issue. The systemic issue was lack of a legal infrastructure or apparatus to ensure that people access justice. And in this case, what we did was we shaped the law, informed by the situation there in the prisons, and now we are knowing the law and using the law. And another perspective of legal empowerment is that communities are not seen as victims or beneficiaries, but as claimants of rights and active participants in the justice system. As I conclude, I'd like to challenge you, as you do this sensitization work, I want you to think deliberately and internally, a self-reflection process. What do you define as impact? As you go out there and create awareness, as you sensitize the student community, whoever it is you're sensitizing, what do you define as impact? And note that what you personally may consider as impact may be different from what people on the ground consider as impact. Vitu kwa ground ni tofauti, so let's have that in mind. And some of the things that may be seen as impact is it the ability of the students to act? Is there change in some policies? Do you have a responsive university institution? And what do you do to realize this kind of impact? My one thing to you as I conclude is that we have to be deliberate in our sensitization. This kind of work is so important. It has got far-reaching consequences. You remember in the beginning when I started and I said I was so disempowered, I didn't know that if there's a violation, who to approach. But had I met Haki Nawiri then, maybe my story would have been different. So I wish you all the best. Be deliberate, self-reflect, and I'm always happy to come back and have further discussions with you. Thank you.